Hello again, everybody. Great to have you along for yet another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. I'm Scott, along with Marjorie in studio with us. And Marnie, how are you out there, my friend? North Carolina, Philadelphia, where might it be today?
I'm in North Carolina getting, children ready to go to college.
Understand. Remember those days well.
I do too.
Yep. Check your wallet, my friend. It gets pricey. Well, I tell you what.
I feel like I'm in an Amazon distribution center, actually, is what I should really say.
Well, you look great, and we're really excited about introducing you to somebody that I know you have yet to meet, but you certainly know who he is and what he's all about and what he continues to do, certainly during the basketball season. And we're talking about one of the greats when you talk about the NBA and broadcasting. Would you not agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. How long have you known Chuck?
Probably since the mid-'80s.
Now, don't look down there because we haven't introduced him yet.
Okay, wherever he is. I've known Chuck since the mid-'80s.
Yeah. When you were in second grade.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
Right. That's what I
try
to help out whenever I can.
I appreciate it.
But I tell you what, he's been the voice of the Dallas Mavericks since 2005. So we're talking coming up on 2 decades next year.
Right, 20 years.
Yeah, this year, 24,
Pretty
25.
impressive.
Yeah, it's very impressive. So we simply say hello to the man himself. How are you, Chuck? Good to see you.
Scott, Marjorie, good to see y'all.
And Marnie out there in North Carolina.
In North Carolina, in the Amazon Fulfillment Center. It's
right.
Yeah. You got a lot of work going on today. That place is full.
I'm getting 2 children to next week is departure date. So we're slowly but surely getting through the stuff.
Yes.
Well, we're going to try and get through this one as quickly as we can. Well, certainly we'll do the same amount of allotted time, as they say.
That's right.
But Mr. Cooperstein would like to get home and see a little something called the Olympics in Paris, France this year, and something called basketball.
Something called basketball.
That's right. Yeah, so who's going to win it this year, you think?
The U.S. should win.
Yeah, I agree.
They should win, but when you're playing one and done, you never know. We've already seen it today with Canada being eliminated by France.
Yeah, isn't that something?
And Germany beat the Americans at the World Cup last year.
Good point.
They took the Americans right to the wire in the warm-up game in London. It took LeBron going nuts in the fourth quarter for them literally to win that game.
Right.
They're tough. They're really built for the international game. They played together for a long time. Won the World Cup last year. I do believe that they are the team ultimately that the Americans will play in the final, and frankly, that if the Americans were going to lose, that is who they would lose to.
Right. Well, what do you think about the Olympics? You like watching the basketball? Do you like the Olympics?
Yeah,
you're a sports guy. Where do the Olympics?
It's awesome. I mean, look, there are certain things that swimming and track and basketball really are the 3 things that I kind of pay attention to.
No gymnastics?
Here's the thing, and this will get a lot of people upset. It's a judge sport.
Right.
It's judged, so it's not, to me, it's not a sport.
You know what? That's a very good point.
It is not. It is absolutely as athletic as you could ever want. I mean, what Simone Biles and all those people do are absolutely absurd. But between that and diving and again, there's the Russian judge, there's the East German judge, there's the American judge, and
I've heard people say that before, and I never thought of it until it was brought in. But I thought, what, doggone it, that's true. And if somebody's got whatever after this person or that country or whatever, that really, it's almost unfair.
I can watch for the spectacle and watch. You want to watch greatness. You want to watch things that you've never seen before, and Simone Biles is absolutely that.
It's unheard of.
But when you're the whole gold medal thing, it's like I just like watching you jump up as high as you can jump up and spin as fast as you spin and get down in one piece, and make it look ridiculously easy.
I know.
But
it's Flip City. I mean, how do you do 43 circles like that?
I know, and then fly up 12 feet up in the air.
But I just can't get as emotionally invested as lots of people do, and frankly, a lot of media people, and it's and as you know, Scott, you were with NBC for a long time. NBC markets the Olympics over the air anyway on the big NBC.
Absolutely.
They market it to a female audience. I mean, very much they're trying to draw that because we're Philistines. We'll watch anything, okay? But they're trying to find a way to get more people to watch, and that's why I think they spend so much time, with gymnastics, because it is different, and it is something. Even though there is men's gymnastics, and they do spend some time with that, I mean, they don't build up the men to be the rock stars,
right?
And this is going back. This is going back to Olga Korbut and Nadia Comaneci in the 70s, right? And before the Americans, really got involved when Bella Caroli came over and Mary Lou Retton became a star in Los Angeles, and from there it's followed from there.
Yeah, Art Connor and Nadia Comaneci, and how they hooked up together, and we've done a couple of events with them here in Dallas, and but you're absolutely right. You're spot on, and I've heard a lot of people say that, and I thought,
figure skating is the same way.
Yeah,
figure skating
when you were saying that, I was
at the
thinking
Winter
of
Games, right?
skating.
I mean, there's a lot of time that's spent on figure skating, and that was even before Tanya and Nancy and all that.
Yeah.
That's true. It's not like you put a puck in the goal. Okay, you got a goal.
Right.
You got a point.
Now some would say, well, what about boxing? Well, at least boxing, there is the possibility of an objective outcome. I can knock you out, and the fight is over, and we don't have to go to the cards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a good point. I've never thought about it that way, but it's still fascinating to see what they can do. What the flips, I just can't even imagine that a human being can do the things that you watch them do. So for me, it's the incredible movements. Even though you're right, it's a judge sport. So
right.
You said you don't really think of it as a sport. So what is it?
They're tremendous athletes who are performing a show.
Oh, okay.
They are tremendous athletes. But frankly, it's in many ways, in my mind, it's no different than if you were going to the ballet, and I
was going to say you can compare with dancing.
How physical that is.
Whether it's ballet, whatever it might be.
Exactly.
Yeah, very good point.
Never really thought about it that way.
Very good point. Very good point. Well, let's talk
basketball. I think that's what we love about sports, though, Chuck, is that, and I love how you just kind of nicely defined it. And here I am thinking that what we love about sports is that there is somebody that is the winner of whatever the competition is. And there's no chance for, like in a movie, you can reshoot it or rewrite it or edit it. But what we love about basketball and all these amazing sports that we get to watch, and you've seen thousands and thousands of games where you could wish we could rewrite maybe the ending, but you just can't do that. So were there games that you wish you could rewrite the ending? How many games were there or not?
That's a good question.
This is only an hour show,
Yeah,
really.
Right.
Oh goodness. Well, let's start with.
All right, how about a top three?
Well, I'll go right to the 2006 NBA Finals. I mean, the Mavericks were up 13 points with 6.5 minutes to go. They're leading the series 2-0. This series is over.
Right.
It's over.
Right.
It's done with. And they lost.
Yeah.
And then they lost badly in Game 4. And then they took everybody out of town for Game 5 and brought it back to play that game in Miami. Mm-hmm. And there's Bennett Salvatore's phantom call on Dirk that put Dwayne Wade on the line. And the Mavericks lose that game, and they wind up losing in 6. Yeah, I'd like to rewrite the script on that.
And that's when you were just.
Yeah, that was my first year. That was my first year.
That was the first year.
That was my first year with the team, and of course, I believe doesn't this happen every year? Don't you go to the finals every year? Don't you play basketball in the June every year?
Well, it didn't take
don't you get your per
long
diem every year?
Again, 5 years later.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But it's 5 years, and then it was 13 until we did it again. It's not like we're not like the Warriors of the late teens. Doing this every year, where it became just part of your normal discourse to play basketball in the June. So,
how confident were you last year that we've got so many other things we want to talk to you about, but you bring up 13 years later. What about last year? I thought that might be the year. I mean, it was 2011. I thought, we're coming back.
I mean, I going into the series, I thought that they were definitely the underdog,
right? Oh, absolutely.
But they definitely had a chance to win, and. There were times in the previous series that Boston had played where they had opened a door, and you have to be able to go through that door because they're great. I mean, they really are. And the Mavericks had that chance in Game 2 when, after getting blown out in Game 1, Boston couldn't make anything.
Right.
They were begging to get beat, and the Mavericks just weren't good enough to beat them.
Yeah.
And if that series is 1-1 at that point, coming back to Dallas to play the next two, at the very least, the series is going 6. And who knows what happens from there?
Yeah.
But Boston they weren't just good, Scott. They were and Marge and Marnie. They were historically good.
Well, it made me think of
Right.
when I was a kid. The Havliceks, the Bob Cousy's, the Bill Russells.
Think about that. The playoffs are far more extended now. They're 4 rounds
True.
as opposed
Good
to
point.
2 when they
Good
played.
point. Good point.
This team, they won 80 games. They won 80 and 21. I mean, even if you think that the NBA is watered down, you win basically 80% of your games, and a lot of them at the highest level of competition. It's really impressive. So that ultimately the Mavericks fell short. It was disappointing, because you obviously want to see them win, but at the same time, it was it was a great education for them. Because ultimately you find out where your weaknesses are and what you have to address. And they went out and did that this summer. We're about to see, pretty soon
Right.
what all that's all about.
So was basketball, has that always been your sport?
No. When I was a kid, I loved baseball. I was a Met fan. I mean, I loved all sports.
So you grew up
but I loved on Long Island, New York,
Island.
and I loved the Mets.
But you're not old enough to remember like the '69
Yes,
Mets.
I am.
Are you?
I'm not. Yeah,
Okay.
I was 9. I mean, I remember Mrs. Cass rolling the TV into the social studies room so we could watch watch the playoffs in the
We
World
had
Series.
the same with Mr. Durr. He rolled the TV into the science class and we watched.
Listen, there are still things about the '69 season that that I can tell you about.
Right.
That. Like if something happened 3 years ago, I couldn't tell you. But and that's some of what makes sports so interesting is that the impressions that they leave on you, especially in your formative years, are the ones that you take into your adulthood and they really sort of form your form your feelings about sports and what.
Well, gosh, and as a 9-year-old kid in '69, there's Nolan Ryan. And all of a sudden,
he was a reliever.
Right, I know, but he was still there as a member of the team.
Yes.
And so now, 20 years later, all of a sudden in '89, he's a member of the Texas Rangers. And here you are, Sportscaster USA. Hello. What was that like? As a 9-year-old kid, you go, oh my gosh, that's the guy I cheered for 2 decades ago.
Fortunately, I guess I'd been through enough in media that I wasn't totally overwhelmed by that.
Okay.
I will say, like when I met Tom Seaver for the first time in a media setting after he had come back to New York, I think it was at 82, I guess that was.
Okay.
And Seaver was it for me, and he's still it for me. I think he's the most perfect pitcher that has ever graced a mound.
Played the game? Yeah.
Ever graced a mound. I mean, his mechanics are just why they're not taught today with so many guys messing up their arms and all that and legs. I don't know. But anyway, I was so disappointed. Like he was such a jerk. It's like
that's too bad.
It was like can I hear the Price is Right music? Dun dun dun. Right, the trombones and so by the time I got to Ryan, it was 7 years later. I was a little bit older, and so it was okay. But it was cool. But it was cool. But so I was a Met fan. And used to go to games all the time. Back in the day when your parents weren't afraid to put you on a train.
Right.
And I mean, I could literally ride the Port Washington branch of the Long Island Railroad right to Shea Stadium, and then right back from Shea Stadium to Manhasset, and I'd get picked up, and it was
that was just normal.
It was just a normal way of doing things.
Right.
If you tried to do that today, your parents would be thought of rather poorly.
You're sending your son where? By himself?
By himself?
Hello?
And how old is he?
Yeah, that's right. Marnie, jump in here.
Well, I love hearing all the stories about how you first became a sports fan. And so what was it about sports that made you say, I think I want to do that? Or did somebody say like, hey, let's bring you in the studio? Like, how did it all happen?
I can't say. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's a very good question.
Well, did you want to do that before you answer her question? Did you want to be involved in sports at any point in your life, or did it just something happen?
Well, I mean, look, I remember going to a Met game. The first Met game I ever went to was Jim Bunning's Perfect Game.
Oh, wow.
I was 5 years old. And I do
you kick off your sports
right,
life
right.
with that?
It's just straight downhill from there.
Exactly.
But I just loved it. I just loved everything about it. And my dad was he was a huge Brooklyn Dodger fan, and he grew up in Brooklyn. Dodgers moved away to L.A. Mets came in. If you live on Long Island, it's like it's kind of a weird thing in New York. If you live like in Queens, Brooklyn, or the Island, you were Mets and Jets. The Nets had not existed at that point, but the Knicks and then the Islanders, when the Islanders came into existence back in the early 70s.
Right.
But if you lived in Manhattan, the Bronx, or Jersey, or whatever, you were Yankees, Giants.
Right.
So it was really weird. It was really weird that way. So, but my parents, were huge sports fans. My mom was a tremendous amateur golfer in the New York Met area. She won the Met Amateur 3 times.
Wow.
Long Island Amateur, I think 8 times. I mean, she was. We had more silver.
And
we had enough silver in our house that you'd have to polish all of it in that room right now.
And you never got into golf?
Oh, yeah. Oh, very much so. I love golf.
But I mean, to the point of doing play-by-play or anything like that?
Oh, well, we did it at KRLD. When I moved to KRLD in 1984, we did the Nelson and Colonial live. We were the first people.
It was new.
Okay.
It was new. They were doing golf live.
You know what? I do remember that now. I had forgotten.
And we used to work. Brad Sham was in the tower,
right?
And then there were 3 of us on the golf course with North Texas PGA professionals as our analysts, and Randy Smith, who is of course now best known as Scotty Scheffler's teacher,
right?
And Justin Leonard's teacher, and a lot of other people's teacher. He and I were always in the last group together, and following that group. It was awesome. It was the most fun. Absolutely the most fun.
Wow.
Very
Chuck,
cool.
Wow.
How did your mother get so involved in golf? Because it is definitely a little bit unusual for women at that age, in that era, to be really interested in golfing. My grandmother was an incredible golfer too, and I'm just curious to know how that happened.
So, when my mom was a young teenager, she really wanted to swim, and she wanted to swim to be in the Olympics. And her father basically told her, well, there's no way for a young woman to make a living by swimming.
Really?
This is 1950.
Okay.
So, my mom tells the story of how, her father and her mother, they'd go to the golf course and they'd just keep saying how hard it was to play and whatever. And, my mom said, there's nothing in the world can be that hard. It can't be that hard.
Good for her.
So she decided, I guess at age 14 to take it up. And the first round she went out with her mom. She shot 109, got beat, didn't like it. My mom was extraordinarily competitive. The next round she shot was 90, did beat her. And probably less than a year later, she was playing in the U.S. Girls Junior at Brookline at the Country Club and got to the semifinals as a 15-year-old.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
So that was her love of golf. And
the rest is history.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
I love that.
And then she wanted to turn pro. But, again, her dad sat her down and said, let's get an 8.5 by 11 pad out here. What are the pros? And what are the cons?
Yeah.
And in 1958, when she's 20 years old, it wasn't really feasible.
There were more cons
it was feasible because it was there,
Right.
but it really wasn't practical. And he was a pretty practical guy. And so instead she got married and she had 2 kids and she's played a lot of amateur golf.
I love hearing your story because all 4 of us here have a lot of influence from our parents and our sports background. So my mother was a golfer also, and she won a lot of tournaments as an adult, but not in sanctioned events or anything like that. And my father was a pitcher in college, and he loved Bob Feller. What are your thoughts? You talk about your favorite pitchers and all.
Bullet Bob?
Yeah.
From Van Meter, Iowa, 1940. The only man to ever pitch a no-hitter on opening day.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
That's
That's
great.
right.
So my dad, he just thought Bob Feller was the pitcher, his favorite.
My dad was a Lou Gehrig fan.
Oh, okay.
Well, he liked the Yankees, but he liked Lou Gehrig.
Yeah?
He liked him because he was educated, went to Columbia, but he was just an integrity-driven man.
But obviously incredibly committed to the cause, playing 2,130 consecutive games.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which we
Right.
thought would never be the record that would never be
isn't that
broken
something?
until
Isn't that something?
until it was.
But
Yeah.
what about your grind? You've got to travel just like the team. You're on the road. You've got all these games. You've got to be well versed on the opponents. What's your life like?
The grind is great. I mean, I wouldn't do this. And
I was going to say that you thrive on it, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, it's the games are great. I mean, there's nothing like walking in the arena and knowing that you're watching the best basketball in the world.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough for 20 years that I had Dirk Nowitzki for the first 14 years of my career,
Right.
and now I've had Luka. And we with 1 year of where they carried over from each other, where they were together. There are people in my business who have never had anything like that. They walk in, their team might win 20 games. They're awful, and there's nothing to carry them through. Even when the Mavericks were bad in like 16 through 18, Dirk was still there.
Yeah.
And so there was
Right.
still the possibility of some magic coming from him. And obviously Luka now, provides that on a nearly nightly basis. So I'm extraordinarily lucky that way. But I love the prep. I love, just digging in on different websites. And, I still handwrite my book, my notes. I don't do them on computer.
Do you?
I just found no programs that work for me.
Interesting.
And that allow me to then like go back and like, okay, what did it look like on February the 1st as opposed to March the 7th, and I've got this thing all figured out, and nobody's been able to show me a better way.
Yeah.
Or at least a way that I'm comfortable with.
Right.
Yeah.
But I love doing the work, basically the 3 hours or so that it takes to do the book. But people always ask, well, how long does it take to prepare to do the game? And the answer is it's infinite. It's infinity. It's an infinite amount of time because you never stop. I mean, whether you're reading or you're talking to your counterparts or you're reading, going on the internet and, oh, wow, I found this is really
Right,
good.
right.
Yeah.
And let's face it, we all hope that the game is good enough that we only use about 15% of what we prepare for, but we got to prepare
Yeah,
for everything because
definitely.
you just
Right.
don't
Never
know.
know.
So, but I love all of that. I still love all of that, and the moment that I don't love that, I do know will be the moment that I'll say I've had
That was-
enough.
So long, everybody.
So
yeah.
to be the voice of a team, what was it that surprised you the most when you went into this role that maybe you didn't anticipate was part of being the voice of the Mavericks?
I don't know that much surprised me. I mean, other than I guess, having done college for a long time and got to be like really close with the coaches that I worked with. That was not the case. Like when I first got to the Mavericks, I was with Avery Johnson was the coach, and I mean he was really nice to me and whatever. But it was something that was professional. It was a professional relationship. When I was at TCU in the mid '90s, Billy Tubbs came from Oklahoma, and Billy was one of a kind. I mean, he really was one of a kind. He was he was a great coach, but he was just fantastic to be around. I mean, stories on top of stories. But the first game he coaches, we're doing his pregame show, and he says to me, "What are you doing after the game?" I said, "Well, I think I'm planning on going home and seeing my wife and going to sleep." He says, "No, you're not. You're coming back to the house with the coaches, and we're gonna watch the game. We're gonna drink beer and eat pizza and do." And literally, I did that for the my 3
Really?
years with them. And
Wow.
so you have that type of relation. I had that type of relationship with Jim Killingsworth. Jim Wacker, when he was the coach at TCU, and I did his games in the mid '80s. And Jim and I worked together on radio. We did national radio together. I mean, there was one. We did a bowl game, and we did the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio, and it was my time to be with my son. And Lil, his wife, said, he said, just bring him down. I said, I'll watch him during the game. I said, because she had her grandkids and all that. So I'd known Jim for so long. It was, so ultimately that was the biggest difference. It was a lot more personal. And even like Rick Carlisle was great to me. I mean, we had Rocky go the first year or so. We're trying to figure each other out. He's trying to see, is he really our guy? And I'm trying to figure out, like, why is this guy as quirky as he is? And then we figured it out, and it was great. And it was, but even that relationship, which involves occasional golf and whatever, it wasn't like that.
Yeah, I remember I've heard other people say that college is more family, the pros is more business.
Yeah.
And so the relationship you had with the coaches or whoever it is,
I think that's a fair way to put it.
It's more family.
Yeah.
In the NBA or NFL, this is business, man.
Yeah.
Let's get this
Right.
done. You got a job to do. Go do your job.
Yeah.
And
I would imagine that would take getting a little used to, since it sounded very different.
A little bit, but in the end, I knew what my job was.
Right.
My job was to be prepared. My job was to broadcast the game and do it well and do it enthusiastically and make sure that people are listening to us and staying with us. The relationships are all a part of that, but I mean, the very basics, really, that doesn't change. And, that's never changed.
Any different now when you knew the coach as a player?
No.
No.
I mean, and Jason's been great. Jason has just been. I'm surprised on some level that how much he has grown, having known him 30 years
as a player.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, knowing him when he was a kid.
I'm floored that he's doing what he's doing as a coach. Just
but
covering him as a player,
right?
And then seeing now, if that's what you're.
I think it's just he was a pretty immature kid. I mean, he did there were crazy things that happened in the '90s, and there's a reason why the Mavericks traded him away, and which they never should have done. But I mean, they traded him. But what he's done as a coach, and especially after his experiences in Brooklyn and Milwaukee, where they didn't necessarily end well, you can see such incredible growth and maturity in him. I mean, to the point where like fans get really upset at him because he doesn't jump up and down. He doesn't scream and yell. He did not have a technical foul all of last year. All of last year.
Is that true?
Yes,
Really?
did not have a technical foul, and people and people are looking. Why don't you get mad? Why don't you do something?
That's not him.
And yet, I mean, the track record now speaks for itself. I mean, he's 3 years, and he's got 2 trips to the conference finals, a trip to the NBA finals. I mean, 2 50-win seasons. He has the ultimate respect of his superstar player, which ultimately you have to do to succeed in the NBA, and he's got both of them. I mean, with Luka and Kyrie Irving, it's been fantastic. He's done a fantastic job, and I would admit I wasn't sure if this was going to really fly here, but I will say also that Rick Carlisle told me after he left, he said Jason's going to be really good.
Really?
He's going to be really good.
Interesting.
Here.
Play off of what you were talking about before. You're talking about Dirk and Luka. Obviously, the 2 greatest players to ever play for the Mavericks. But what is it that they really bring, their strong points, and then maybe the shortcomings that maybe we might not be aware of?
Dirk is absolutely the most unaffected superstar I've ever been around.
Interesting.
He's the most regular person you could ever imagine, being as spectacular as he is at what he did for as long as he did it.
Just a kind, respectful guy.
I mean, I always tell the story. My first year, late in the year, the Mavericks are playing in L.A. against the Clippers. It's a lousy game, but he hits a shot with about a half second to go, and they win. We're flying to San Francisco, playing the next night, and when we get to the hotel, the equipment truck, follows by a few minutes, and the iguanas of the world, like me, basically we help unload the truck, which has our bags and everything like that. And you want to get to the room, you want to get to sleep, whatever. Well, everybody's getting to the truck. Truck shows up, slinging bags. They're getting tagged so they can get up to the room, because a lot of guys, the guys will just go right to the room. Well, at one point I get a bag, I turn around, I'm bringing it over to the sidewalk. And who's there? Who's slinging bags? There's Dirk. Wow. He's slinging bags at 2:00 in the morning. He had just hit a game-winning shot, and I'm thinking, yeah, Kobe's doing this, right? LeBron's doing this, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, he's just a regular person, but incredibly committed to his craft. And,
definitely.
With Luka, Luka plays, believe it or not, through. And okay, the bad part first. He obviously argues with the officials way too much.
Right,
and that's at some point it's got to get.
And even as a guy sitting at home just watching the game, I'm aware of that.
Right. It's got to get calmed down. But there is a joy that Luka plays with. When he knows that he's got it going, like he did in Atlanta, the 73-point game, or the Phoenix game on Christmas where he went for 50. When he knows he's got it going, and he knows then, like in the playoffs against Minnesota this year, or Phoenix a couple of years ago in Game 7 against Devin Booker, he just kind of looks over and smiles at you and says, "I got you. I got you." And so you have no chance against me.
Wow.
I mean, it's there is a boyish joy, and you can see that because he wants to play all year round. He wants to play for his national team,
right?
And did so trying to qualify for the Olympics this year,
right?
But I mean, he was so banged up, and there are a lot of people, and I'm a big proponent of international basketball, of guys playing international basketball in the summer. If you're going to play, because they're all going to play. They're not just going to sit on their butt and do nothing.
Right.
They're going to play. It might as well be in some type of structured atmosphere. If you're going to. But he was so beat up. It was such a long season that had started with the World Cup the previous August in Japan and in the Philippines. It's like, man, Luka, can you sit this one out? Can you take a rest? And of course, they didn't qualify. They got beat by Greece in Piraeus, so they didn't get to Paris. And I think there are people who probably they'll never say it, but they're probably happy that there is about a month that he doesn't have to play ball and play serious ball.
Yeah.
But that's all. Related back to the joy that he has for playing basketball.
It's fun to watch somebody with that kind of joy.
Oh, it's incredible.
Incredible, it is.
Because you don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
You walk into the arena every night, and Bob Ryan, the famous writer from the Boston Globe, always said this: I walk into the arena every night, and there's a pretty good chance I'm going to see something I've never seen before. And frankly, it's the challenge of broadcasting Luka, because he's going to do something that I've never seen before, and I'm going to have to do this in real time. And how am I going to get this out so that it actually makes sense to people, let alone to me? But I wouldn't have it any other way. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, that's a huge point. Best player all time.
Instant.
Favorite of all time. You had one player. You're putting a team together.
Wilt.
And it doesn't matter.
Wilt
Chamberlain. Okay.
I mean. And people, this is basically all based on your growing up and who you saw, when you saw. Yeah. Listen.
What they did compared to everybody else on the court.
Wilt did things that were so far ahead of his time. They rewrote the rule book for him.
Right.
So I mean, he's my guy. His teams weren't as good as Bill Russell's teams in the '60s, and I realize we're in the rings culture. Rings. GSZZZ, and that's what people look at when they try to have these conversations. But for me, Wilt is
he was the guy. Marnie, jump in.
Well, first of all, I love the story about Dirk doing the bag duty, because my grandfather, it's interesting, owned a professional football team, and he would always say to me, make sure that you carry at least one of your own bags. And I think because it just is like a way to keep you back, remembering of like where you started or whatever it is. All right. So new ownership, how has that impacted the team?
Not in the least. I mean,
Really? Pretty seamless.
I mean,
What'd you think about that whole scenario?
I was surprised. I mean, I never imagined Mark selling now, and certainly
Or ever.
Yeah, ever,
well,
yeah.
that it would be kind of like with the Jones family with the Cowboys, that it would be a family thing. So it was surprising, but Patrick Dumont, who is now the team's governor. I mean, I haven't talked to him a lot, but when we've talked, it's been very pleasant, and I think he's clearly committed. He's got his ideas. I mean, obviously he's given Nico Harrison a tremendous amount of power, and he's not telling Nico who we got to draft. Mark was in the room, and Mark was different in that way. That was Mark's passion to be involved with that. Patrick is not that way. Patrick's he's part of the Sands Corporation, and they're trying to build hotels and casinos, and do that. So he's given Nico a lot of latitude to do what he feels he needs to do, and I think we can just look at this offseason, because this is the first one that we've had, since the ownership change.
Right.
It looked pretty productive to me. I mean, you may think differently, others might think differently, but it seems to work pretty well. But I think there's a lot there. There's a lot that I think he wants to accomplish.
Interesting.
So you mentioned the building. What are some of your favorite venues? And have you ever felt like, wow, I'm in this iconic building,
Well, look, I grew up in New York. Madison Square Garden was it for me. My first few years there, we literally had the best seat in the house, right above the tunnel, right at center court. It was just everything I dreamed of as a kid. I mean, literally listening to Marv Albert and with the transistor radio under my pillow. It's like, and hearing John Condon's voice, but he wasn't there then as the voice of Madison Square Garden. But the Garden was always it. I mean, now it's a very difficult place for us to work. They don't give us a lot of space, and it's there a lot of things that we expect that every other team provides, the Knicks don't provide. But there's still something about
Jack,
walking.
wait, like what? Like what would be some of those things?
It's just the space that we have to work, the statistics that are normally passed out at every time out. We're lucky if we get them once a quarter.
Really?
Why is that?
Yeah.
Why, I mean, they've got to be aware of that.
They are aware of it. They've been aware of it for 20 years. Everybody knows it, and for whatever reason, the NBA does not want to put their foot down with them. And so it's a true love-hate relationship.
Does the home team get those?
No, they have the same. They have the same issues. Yeah, it's everybody. They don't discriminate.
Okay.
But like I say, it's the ultimate love-hate relationship, because if you are watching a game in that building, and especially if the Knicks are good, which they are right now, there's nothing like it. There isn't, and you ask players around the league where they want to play, and it's almost unanimous. And not only do we want to play, but where do you want to be great? Like, if you want to play and play great, where do you want to do that? You want to play great in the Garden. So, I mean, that was special. The first time I did a football game at Florida Field, being a graduate of the University of Florida, that was tremendously meaningful to me. And it's a fabulous stadium, and just everything about it. And my first Florida Georgia game in Jacksonville was a big deal. I mean, it was like, I want to say it was about 38 years after the last one that I had been to, so that was really pretty meaningful. But like in the NBA now, there like San Francisco, built that the Warriors built that building on the bay, and it's incredible. We literally are in a booth that's like a football booth. I mean, there's just so much space in there. It's great. LA is great. Even though there's only one place now where we're actually on the floor, on the front row for radio, and that's in Chicago. But every place else, for the most part, we're at the back of the lower bowl or higher, like we are in Dallas, actually. But those places where you're at the back of the lower bowl, where you've got, as long as you've got a good view at this point, because I fought the good fight with the NBA for a long time and lost. And I've come to understand that I have lost. So let's, all I want now is space. Is just give me enough room to do my job, and I'm a happy camper. I can do it from any place.
That's interesting. She talks about her grandfather being involved with a NFL team. He was the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, her grandfather, Marnie's. And
Leonard Toast?
Yep, you got it. That's exactly right. That's
really?
Yeah. And her mother, who is Leonard's daughter, is the only, to this very day, Chuck, only female general manager in the history of the NFL.
Oh, that.
Isn't that something?
Wow, that is something.
To this very day.
So Marnie grew up with lots of space because she was in the owner's box.
Yeah, she was in the owner's See, you learn something new every day.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Well, and that's why we all speak the same language, because I think sports really definitely bring everybody together. And so I think that is, I love hearing all these stories. Now, what about your kids, Chuck? Are they interested in basketball? Are they interested in sports? What are their passions?
I got one. I got it right the first time and I stopped. My son Jeffrey is 28 and he is my mini-me. He literally is my mini-me, and he's been my mini-me for, well, ever since he realized what sports was and sports media was. When we're going to a Stars game one night and coming into the parking lot, and I've got the press parking, and he from the back seat just pipes up and says, "Dad," says, "how come you always have the good parking?"
The things they notice.
And as I said to Jeffrey, I said, that's a very important point that you have just brought up, because there are always tickets. There is not always parking, it's worse and worse now. But he works for a digital sports company in Dallas, and he's doing great, and he loves it. And I'm very lucky that he wants to talk to his father. He likes his father. So we talk pretty much every day. In fact, he texted me this morning. He was very upset that the France-Canada basketball game was like 6 minutes into the game, and it was not on television yet when it was. And like, why is this? What are they doing? Why are they showing skateboarding? What's the deal with this?
What are they thinking?
They've already missed 6 minutes.
What are they thinking here? So, he's a sweet kid. He really is a great kid, and frankly, always has been. So I'm very, very fortunate.
Well, you know what they say, apples don't fall far from trees.
This is true. Well, this one fell like right next to the tree. Not even, maybe on the bark even.
He's still got some bark on his right side where he tumbled down.
Yeah. Yes. So Chuck, how did you've built this wonderful career since you've been in Texas. You're from New York. How do you end up in Florida for college, end up in Texas? And when you got here, did you have any idea of how well you were, what a great decision it was?
Well, I mean, I hated cold and I hated snow.
Yeah, I was going to say Rochester, New York, right? Snow,
and that's even more snow and more cold.
It's got the lake,
right? Yes.
Yeah.
So I was always going to go south, and I really wanted to go to North Carolina, but because Dean Smith was coaching North Carolina, and I loved basketball, and a ton of Long Island kids were at North Carolina, and it was going to be great, but you needed Harvard-like SATs to have them to go there from out of state. Mm-hmm. I did not have those, so I needed the next step. But I mean, really, I wanted I didn't want to be in the cold and snow. Mm-hmm. I wanted a big school because I went to a small private high school. Oh, so okay. I was not going to go to a small Northeastern liberal arts school. That was not going to happen. Yeah. And then big enough so that I could change my major 50 times if I needed to. Fortunately, I never had to. And I needed a football team to root for on Saturday. It was really, really important to me. Yeah. And as it turned out, at Florida, I also became a manager for the basketball team my first couple of years. And the head coach at the time was a guy named John Lotz, who had been Dean Smith's top assistant at North Carolina for 8 years before he took the Florida job. And my high school coach knew him, so they said it all, and that was my end. And I was there. I did it 2 years, but I knew that managing is usually a precursor toward coaching, and I knew I was definitely not doing that.
Oh,
and I knew what I wanted to do, and that's when I started working, for the school station at Florida. And then, after college, I moved back to New York, lived with my folks for a couple of years. But I mean, I was never looking to stay. I was always looking to go. And then, the opportunity came in 1984 to move to Dallas and moved to KRLD, which was absolutely a monster at the time. Had the rights to the Cowboys. Did a lot of college football and college sports, and
you were like part of the dream team at KRLD at that time.
We had a phenomenal staff, and Frank Lieber was still there at the time. He passed about 9 months after I moved to Dallas.
Yeah, what a great guy!
Oh, he was incredible, and just what an incredible talent. I mean, just a ridiculously incredible talent.
Awesome.
And so we had Brad, and then Art Haynes, who then left a year later or so to become the voice of Missouri State in his hometown of Springfield, Missouri. Still is today.
Oh, really?
And does the
okay.
does the pregame half and post for the Kansas City Chiefs on their network. Brian Briscoe was on the air with us, was our midday on the air guy, and then was Brad's producer for Sports Central, the talk show.
Yep.
He left then to get into sports information at SMU, and then has gone on and done a whole bunch of really cool things in PR. We hired a guy named Dave Woloshin, who wound up doing mornings for us. Did A&M basketball for a year, but he was from Memphis. We had to talk him into coming to Dallas, and then had a chance to go back to Memphis. And he's the voice of the Memphis Tigers, football and basketball.
Craig Way, now the voice of the
obviously
Texas
Craig.
Longhorns.
And Craig was, actually got the job first before I think Craig thought he was going to get the job that ultimately I got.
Oh, really?
But then Craig came in about a little less than a year later, and obviously he's done incredibly well. I mean, just not just as the voice of the Longhorns, but he is the authority on high school football in the state of Texas, and has been ever since I've known him. I mean, which is almost 40 years. I mean, it's just, he had especially for a guy from North Carolina, he had the love and the passion for Texas high school football that, frankly, everybody thinks they have that. Everybody thinks they do.
And then they meet Craig.
And then they meet Craig. And Craig's on an entirely different level. But that's who we had. I mean, it was.
Oh, I've always to this day thought there was never a better broadcast team in any station anywhere.
And we covered everything. We traveled. Brad sent me to New Orleans when the death penalty was approved by the NCAA. And then there were a couple of other things that with the NCAA that I had to go on the road for. It was like we were a newspaper on radio.
Right.
And we really did it right. And it wasn't just for sports. I mean, it was for everything that had to be done. But obviously, sports does get more fun trips probably than anybody else.
We've never complained.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, so we'd like to hear from you. Just what you're proudest of in all that you've gotten to be a part of, Chuck. I mean, it's incredible what you've done, as Marjorie just made note of. So what comes to mind in 2 minutes? What
Wow.
What do you think?
I'm proud that I never changed who I was. I knew what I wanted, what I thought sports should sound like, whether I was doing all news, whether I was doing a talk show, or whether I was doing play-by-play. I knew what that should sound like. And there were a lot of people who tried to reinvent the wheel. And I was not one that was ready to reinvent the wheel. I knew who I was, and I knew what I did well. And I really tried to lean in hard to that. So, I mean, if anybody's going to look at legacy, which is just absolutely insane to think of, the idea that, I was a professional. I was a pro's pro. That people in the business really respected what I did. Billy Tubbs always used to use the line, "It's always nice to have your belly rubbed," But and from outside people, look, we all want that. We all have egos in this business. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are without them. But it really does mean a ton when it comes from the people that you work with, and they tell you that you did a really, really good job, or you're really good at this, and we really want you because you're really good at this. I think that's the thing that I take most with me. I mean, I've been fortunate enough, like you said, to call a championship in the NBA. I called Peyton Manning's last game at Tennessee in the Orange Bowl, which was a national championship game for Nebraska. I've covered a ton of big events and been pretty much to every arena that I could ever have dreamt of, except maybe like the Montreal Forum. Like I would love to have gone there. Never got a chance to go there. Toronto's Maple Leaf Gardens had never the old Chicago Stadium. I mean, some of those places I wish I had gone to, but especially on the college level, because I did college sports for so long. The only places I've never been to for work that I would really like to be at are Notre Dame. And the Big House in Michigan.
Oh yeah.
Other than that, I've been. I'm Johnny Cash, man. I've been everywhere, man.
But I have to say this, Chuck. When I first met you in the middle of the '80s to even now, you're like Luca. You come with joy. I have never seen that diminish in any way through all these years. You are not just working as a professional. You exude the joy of what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Ditto.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Yeah,
Marjorie?
It radiates all the way over here in the Carolinas.
Oh wow! So what are we like? America's Got Talent here. We got all the yeses here, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, this is the American talent, the trifecta right here.
Exactly.
Thanks, Marnie. Stay well in North Carolina. We'll see you next week. And Marjorie, the same to you. And most importantly, to you.
Thanks,
really,
guys, for
you've
having me.
become
I
a dear friend to us all for a long time.
Appreciate
Keep it up. You're a Hall of Famer in our minds, on and off the court. So well done, Chuck.
Thank you.
Well done. That's it for this edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. For Chuck Cooperstein, our special guest, and of course, the trifecta. Till next week, stay safe, be well.